The morning sky above East Anglia was pale and silent, the kind of cold that bit through the flight suits before the sun had even cleared the horizon. Rows of B-17s sat waiting, silver hulks breathing white vapor into the dawn. Captain Jack Avery stood at the edge of the tarmac, helmet in hand, watching the last crews climb aboard. They were young, barely men, each one pretending not to notice the empty spots on yesterday's flight line. The Luftwaffe had taken 30 bombers last mission, 90 men who never came home. Somewhere out there, German fighters prowled, confident no American escort could reach them yet. Jack clenched his jaw, the echo of radio screams still haunting his ears. "They call it the empty sky," he muttered under his breath, "because that's what comes back." As the engines roared to life, the world trembled. He saluted the departing formation, a silent vow burning behind his eyes. Someday, the hunters would have escorts. Someday they'd fly back. The afternoon sky over East Anglia was silent again, save for the distant hum of engines returning from hell. Jack stood with his squadron along the flight line, counting the dots that should have been bombers. Only a fraction came back. One by one, the crippled planes limped in, missing engines, wings, torn by cannon fire, wheels half jammed. Fire trucks waited like undertakers. Tex Harding leaned against a jeep, his grin gone, a cigarette trembling between his fingers. They'd all seen it before, but it never dulled. The sky kept taking men faster than they could replace them. Jack turned away as a B-17 belly landed in a scream of metal and smoke. A ground crew ran toward the wreck. Somewhere behind him, Alice Munro shouted orders through the haze. Jack's hands clenched. The brass still called these strategic successes. He called them funerals. Inside the hangar, the silence after the crash felt heavier than the noise. Mechanics worked in hushed rhythm, pulling charred fragments from returning aircraft. Jack sat on a crate beside Alice, the air thick with oil and grief. "They're kids," she muttered, eyes fixed on the mangled tail of a bomber. "They never even make it to 20. Jack said nothing. He didn't have words left for comfort. Outside, the sun fell early behind low clouds, casting the hangar in half-light. Tex entered, tossing his gloves on the bench. "Command says they're planning longer-range escorts soon," he said, voice rough with disbelief. Alice looked up. "Longer range? With what?" Tex shrugged. "Something fast, something that might actually come back." For the first time that day, Jack's eyes lifted. Hope, quiet, dangerous hope, flickered. Night settled over the base, with a wind that whistled through the hangar rafters. Jack found himself alone by the perimeter fence, eyes fixed on the horizon where the bombers had disappeared that morning. Every mission felt like sending brothers into a storm with no way home. Somewhere deep inside, guilt gnawed. The guilt of a fighter pilot grounded, forced to watch. Behind him, Tex approached quietly, 2 tin mugs steaming in his hands. "Here," he said, offering one. "Coffee's half frozen, but it beats the dark." Jack took it, nodded. They stood in silence, the glow from the control tower barely touching them. Above, the stars shimmered faintly. Unreachable lights over an unreachable war. The next morning broke under sleet and low clouds. Jack met Colonel Davis in the operations tent. A map of Europe spread before them, pins marking lost formations. "We can't keep sending them like this," Jack said, voice tight. The colonel's eyes, gray and tired, met his. "Command's aware. There's talk of a new escort. Long range, high altitude. Faster than anything we've got." Jack frowned. "Talk doesn't stop bullets." Davis gave a slow nod. "No, but maybe the next bird will." Outside, Alice's laughter cut through the cold as she teased a mechanic about frozen fuel lines. Life persisted even among ghosts. Jack stepped outside and looked east, the sound of distant engines echoing faintly, a sound he swore he'd protect, whatever it took. The next week brought a wind that felt different. Rumors spread faster than the chill. Whispers of a new fighter arriving from the States, one that could fly farther, faster, and fight higher than anything the Luftwaffe had ever faced. Jack Avery stood on the line beside Tex as trucks rolled in, carrying crates marked North American Aviation. When the tarps came off, sleek silver shapes gleamed beneath. The first P-51 Mustangs. Alice Munro ran her hand along one wing, awe softening her grease-streaked face. "Looks like she was built for vengeance," she said. Tex whistled low. "Hell, she looks like she's already won." Jack just stared, a fire lighting behind his eyes. This was it. The answer to every empty seat at breakfast, every name scratched off the roster. The sky wouldn't be empty much longer. By afternoon, the hangar buzzed with life again. Mechanics crawled under the new fighters, adjusting cables and checking oil lines. Alice barked orders like an orchestra conductor, her voice sharp but full of pride. Tex climbed into one cockpit, whistling at the dials. "Feels like sittin' inside a bullet," he called out. Jack approached, eyes scanning the wings, the laminar flow design, the sleek nose housing that mighty Merlin engine. "She's not just a bullet," he said quietly. "She's a promise." The first engine fired, the sound clean and furious, unlike anything they'd heard before. Everyone stopped working for a heartbeat, the roar vibrating through their bones. Hope wasn't a rumor anymore. It had an engine and wings. Training began before dawn. The pilots gathered in the briefing hut, eyes half open but hearts wide awake. Colonel Davis stood before the blackboard, chalking a simple line from England to Berlin. "Gentlemen," he said, "this time you'll be there and back again." The men exchanged glances. No one wanted to hope too much, but it was impossible not to. Jack studied the flight plan, tracing the long red arc across the continent. He could almost see the bombers beneath them, protected for the first time. Outside, the Mustangs waited in neat formation, wings catching the first light. Jack whispered to himself, "Let's see how the Luftwaffe likes a fair fight." That afternoon, the airfield thundered with test flights. The P-51s tore across the sky, leaving contrails that shimmered like blades of light. Jack led the first sortie, heart pounding as the Mustang leapt forward, smooth and sure. Every movement responded like instinct. No delay, no drag, just pure power. Over the radio, Tex whooped, "She dances, Jack. She damn near dances." Jack smiled, banking hard over the coastline, watching the English Channel glint beneath him. Below, Alice watched with her crew, shading her eyes against the sun. For the first time in months, she smiled without forcing it. Above them, freedom roared. Evening brought calm. The Mustangs rested on the tarmac under a crimson sky, their metal glowing gold in the fading light. Jack walked between them, running his fingers along the smooth fuselages, each serial number a silent promise. Tex joined him, still grinning. "Tomorrow we fly with the Fortresses," he said, "straight into Germany." Jack nodded slowly. "They've mocked our bombers long enough. Let's see them mock us now." Nearby, Alice sat on a toolbox, grease-stained hands clasped, watching her machines like a proud mother. The engines clicked softly as they cooled, the sound of steel hearts waiting for dawn. Dawn on mission day broke sharp and blue, the kind of cold that made breath look like ghosts. The P-51 stood ready, wings glistening with frost, their red-nosed markings glowing faintly in the rising light. Jack Avery paced beside his fighter, checking every latch and line as Alice tightened the final bolts. "Shall fly true," she said, her voice steady, but her hands lingering on the metal as if letting go of a friend. Jack nodded, helmet under his arm. Tex jogged up, his grin back in full strength. "Berlin, huh? Always wanted to see the place." Jack smirked. "You'll see it through Gunsmoke." Engines began to growl across the field, the sound swelling into thunder. Colonel Davis' voice crackled over the radio tower. "Escort group, you are cleared for takeoff." And just like that, history started to move. The squadron lifted off in perfect formation, slicing through the thin morning haze. Beneath them, waves of B-17s droned eastward, a city of wings stretching to the horizon. Jack kept position just above the lead bomber, eyes sweeping the endless blue. "Keep your eyes open," he called. "They'll come for the easy ones first." Tech's voice crackled back. "Ain't any easy ones today." For hours they flew, Europe rolling beneath them. Rivers, forests, scars of old battles. Then, faint glints on the horizon. Jack's jaw tightened. Bandits 11 o'clock high. The Luftwaffe was coming. They came screaming out of the sun. Messerschmitts and Focke-Wulfs diving like hawks. For a heartbeat, the sky erupted. Jack rolled hard left, feeling the Mustang respond like muscle and nerve. "Tex, with me." Tracers ripped past the canopy as the bombers opened fire below. Jack caught sight of a 109 banking for another pass and squeezed the trigger. The Mustang's 6 Brownings tore through the air. The German plane shuddered, then spiraled away in flame. "Scratch one!" Tex shouted. "One!" Tex shouted. "They're breaking formation." For the first time, the hunters were the hunted. Jack's heart pounded with a savage clarity. This was what the Mustang had been built for. Minutes turned to eternity. The radio filled with clipped calls, bursts of static, and screams cut short. Jack dove through a swirl of vapor, chasing another German fighter. He squeezed the trigger. Nothing. Guns jammed. The enemy plane rolled behind him, warning lights flashed. Before he could react, Tech's Mustang streaked past, guns blazing, tearing the enemy apart in a storm of metal. "You owe me one, Falcon!" Tex yelled through the comm. Jack laughed, breath ragged. "Put it on my tab!" He leveled out, scanning the horizon. The bombers were still there, still flying. For once, the sky wasn't empty. By the time they crossed the Rhine, the sky was theirs. Smoke trailed behind the defeated German fighters retreating toward the east. Jack's voice came over the radio, calm and sure. "Form up. Stay with the bombers." Beneath them, Berlin loomed faintly through the haze, dark, sprawling, and finally within reach. "You think they still believe we can reach him?" Tex asked. Jack smiled under his mask. "They believe it now." As the Mustangs guided the bombers toward their target, the old ghosts of fear began to fade. The sound that filled the air wasn't loss anymore. It was vengeance, justice, and the promise of return. The next day's mission began with the same ritual. Coffee gone cold, briefing murmurs, and the map lines stretching deep into the heart of Germany. But something felt different. Intelligence had reported a new Luftwaffe ace leading intercepts east of Hanover. The name made the room hush. Major Karl Heinemann. Had downed more than 40 Allied aircraft. Now he was hunting the new intruders. Jack studied his photo on the briefing board, a sharp-eyed man with a half-smile that didn't reach his eyes. "He thinks the sky's still his," Tex muttered. Jack nodded once. "Then let's change his mind." Engines began to growl outside, that same mechanical heartbeat before battle. Somewhere beyond the clouds a legend waited, and today he'd meet another. Over the German countryside the air turned heavy with anticipation. Jack's squadron cut through the upper clouds, escorting the bombers toward Hanover. The radio hissed with static until a cold, accented voice broke through. "Amerikaner, welcome to my sky." It was Heinemann. A moment later, contrails sliced across the sun. Messerschmitts diving in formation, their black crosses flashing like blades. "Here," Tex growled. Jack steadied his breathing. "Stay tight. He wants chaos. We give him precision." The first shots tore the air apart. The duel had begun. The sky became a storm of steel and fire. Jack broke left, chasing a 109 through the clouds, the Mustang roaring in pursuit. Suddenly, another fighter streaked past. Heinemann. Their eyes met for an instant through glass and gun smoke. Heinemann's maneuvers were surgical, his plane rolling with impossible grace. Jack followed, matching every turn, every climb, until both fighters burst into open blue. "You are good, American." Heinemann's voice crackled over the open channel. "But not good enough." Jack smirked. "We'll see." He cut throttle, dropped altitude, and looped beneath the German ace, a deadly waltz unfolding in silence. Tech's voice crackled over the comm. "Jack, you've got 2 on you." Jack rolled hard, bullets flashing past his canopy. Heinemann was hurting him, pushing him into open sky. "Come on," Jack whispered. "Take the bait." He throttled down just enough, pretending to lose control. Heinemann closed in for the kill, confident, methodical. At the last instant, Jack pulled back hard, the Mustang flipping into a tight vertical climb. Heinemann overshot, his 109 now framed dead center in Jack's sights. The world narrowed to a heartbeat and a trigger pull. "This one's for all of them," Jack murmured, and fired. The German fighter exploded in a bloom of fire and smoke, spinning toward the earth like a dying star. Jack leveled out, breath catching in his throat. The sky fell silent again, only the hum of his Mustang steady in his ears. Tech's voice came through faintly. "You got him, Jack. He's done." Jack didn't answer. He just stared at the black plume drifting below, where a legend had fallen. "No one owns the sky," he whispered. The bombers droned safely toward their targets, unchallenged. Below, the smoke spread across the horizon like the shadow of an ending. The morning sky over the channel was steel gray as the bombers formed up. Hundreds of them, each one a thunderous heartbeat of defiance. Jack and Tex led the Mustang escort, their red-nosed fighters gleaming under the cloud. The radio chatter was low, almost reverent. This was it, Berlin. The city that had once seemed untouchable. "Feels different today," Tex said quietly. Jack nodded. "It should. We're bringing the war home to them now." Behind them, Alice watched from the ground, arms folded tight, listening to the distant rumble of engines fading east. The men she'd kept alive were flying into history. Hours into the flight, the city appeared like a bruise on the horizon. Berlin, vast and gray beneath a veil of smoke. The Luftwaffe rose to meet them, but it was too late. Mustangs were already there, cutting through the defenders like lightning. Jack's voice came over the radio, firm and composed. "Stay tight on the fortresses. No one gets through." The air filled with chaos. Flak bursts, tracer lines, engines screaming. Jack dove on a Focke-Wulf chasing a bomber, firing in short, ruthless bursts until the enemy broke apart. The bombers held course. Steady, unstoppable. The myth of invincibility was burning. Flak tore through the air like thunder, made solid. Jack's canopy rattled as explosions bloomed around him. "Stay high!" he shouted, voice barely audible over the chaos. Tex's laughter came through the comm, defiant, unshaken. "They can't hit what they can't catch." The Mustang twisted through the smoke, every motion pure instinct. Down below, Berlin burned. Rail yards, factories, airfields. Jack felt no triumph, only a grim understanding. This was the price of ending a war. The Mustang was not just a weapon. It was a promise made to every bomber crew that never came home. As the last bombs fell, the Luftwaffe broke and fled. Only fragments of their once proud squadrons remained. Jack's breath came slow and steady. Now, his heartbeat easing as silence returned. "Tex, you still with me?" he called. A pause. Then Tech's voice, rough but smiling. "Still here, boss. Still flying." Jack looked down through the fading smoke at the city below. He knew men were dying, civilians, soldiers, all of them trapped in the machine of war. But he also knew this moment would end it sooner. The world needed to see that even Berlin could burn. The Invincible had fallen. The Mustangs circled once more before turning west, their shadows stretching over the ruins below. Jack glanced at Tex, their eyes meeting through the canopies. A silent exchange between men who'd seen too much and lived anyway. "Let's take him home," Jack said quietly. As they crossed back over the front lines, the sun broke through the clouds, golden light spilling across their wings. Behind them, Berlin burned, its smoke reaching high into the heavens. The Luftwaffe had mocked unescorted bombers once. Now, they would remember the sound of the Mustangs forever. The air over England was calm when the Mustangs returned, their engines softer now, tired but proud. The sun hung low, casting long shadows across the fields. Ground crews rushed from the hangars as the first planes touched down. Jack's wheels kissed the runway, and for a heartbeat, he sat still in the cockpit, listening to the ticking of the cooling metal. Around him, other Mustangs landed, fewer than had left that morning. When Tex climbed down from his fighter, Jack met him with a quiet nod. "We made it," Tex said, voice cracked, but sure. "Yeah," Jack replied. "Most of us." The wind carried the faint echo of engines fading into memory, leaving only silence, and the knowledge that the sky was finally theirs. As night fell, the base filled with motion, mechanics working under floodlights, medics waiting by ambulances, and cooks stirring soup for men who hadn't eaten all day. Inside the mess tent, laughter mingled with silence, some men celebrating, others staring at nothing. Tex leaned back, raising a tin mug. "To the ones who didn't make it back," he said. Jack lifted his in return, "and to the ones who brought them home." The mugs clinked, the sound fragile but resolute. Across the room, Alice watched them quietly, her eyes glistening. She'd patched up those planes with her hands, but she knew what really flew them. Courage and ghosts. Later, Jack found himself walking the quiet airfield alone. The hangars stood dark, the runway slick with mist. He stopped by his Mustang, resting a hand on its nose. The metal was cold, still scarred from the fight. "You did good," he whispered, as if speaking to something alive. The wind carried the distant hum of another squadron returning late, their lights blinking in the night. For the first time in months, Jack felt the weight lift slightly from his chest. The war wasn't over, but something had changed. The fear had gone. Above him, stars blinked faintly through thin clouds, free, eternal and silent witnesses to what men had done for the right to fly. Inside the hangar, Alice worked alone, wiping down tools and cleaning the oil-slick floors. Her hands trembled as she paused, looking at the helmets lined on the bench, each marked with a name. Some of those names would never answer again. She took a deep breath and whispered softly, "You brought them home." Her reflection stared back from a steel panel, eyes tired yet proud. When Jack appeared at the door, she smiled faintly. "They flew like they were built to win," she said. Jack nodded. "They were built by people like you." For a moment, neither spoke, the silence carrying more meaning than words ever could. Before dawn, Jack stood at the edge of the runway once more, the same spot where he'd watched the bombers vanish months before. The wind was softer now, carrying only peace instead of dread. Tex joined him, hands in his jacket pockets. "Heard command wants us in France next," he said. Jack smiled faintly. One war at a time. The first light crept over the horizon, touching the Mustangs with a warm glow. For all they'd lost, for all they'd endured, they were still here. Breathing, fighting, alive. Jack looked toward the east and whispered, "They'll never fly alone again." Winter came early that year. The war was shifting, victory near, but the cold over Europe still bit deep. Jack flew one final patrol, not to fight, but to watch. Below him, smoke no longer rose from cities but from chimney. The fields that once burned were alive again with movement. "Strange," Tex said over the radio, his voice quieter than usual. "The sky feels empty again." Jack smiled faintly. "That's how it should be." As they turned back toward England, the world below looked fragile, as if waking from a long nightmare. The iron sky that once swallowed men whole now seemed softer, forgiving. Yet Jack knew the ghost still lingered. Men who never made it home, but whose courage filled every contrail that vanished in the blue. In the ruins outside Berlin, Major Karl Heinemann's old airfield lay silent, littered with broken aircraft and rusting fuel drums. A group of German civilians scavenged among the wrecks, children climbing through shattered fuselages where legends once sat. In one corner, half buried under frost, lay Heinemann's crashed Messerschmitt, the emblem of the Black Cross faded to gray. A boy stopped and stared at the bullet holes running along its side, tracing them with his fingers as if reading history through scars. He looked up to see a flight of Allied fighters pass overhead, their engines distant thunder. For a moment he didn't feel anger, only wonder. The sky no longer belonged to death. It belonged to tomorrow. Back in England, the base grew quieter with each passing day. Missions were fewer, and the men who once lived by the hour now found themselves uncertain of peace. Jack sat in his quarters, writing a letter. Not to family, but to the parents of a lost pilot. His words came slow. He flew bravely. He didn't die alone. He folded the page carefully, sealing it with steady hands. Outside, Tex was helping Alice pack up tools, both of them smiling through the exhaustion of survival. The war was ending, but its echoes would never fade. The sound of engines, the smell of oil, the sight of contrails vanishing into dawn. These would live forever in their bones. A ceremony was held at the airfield weeks later. Medals pinned, names read aloud, flags lowered under gray skies. Jack stood among the ranks, listening as voices carried over the wind. When Colonel Davis called his name, he stepped forward, saluted, and received the Distinguished Flying Cross with quiet humility. "You gave them back the sky," Davis said. Jack only nodded. The crowd applauded, but it wasn't for glory. It was for survival, for brotherhood, for the thousands who never returned. When the ceremony ended, Alice found him near the hangar, her eyes glimmering. "You did what you promised," she whispered. Jack looked toward the horizon. No one flies alone anymore. At dusk, Jack returned to the runway one last time. The field was quiet now. The Mustangs lined up like sleeping giants. He touched the wing of his aircraft, feeling the cold metal under his palm, and closed his eyes. The air carried the scent of rain, the faint hum of faraway engines from another squadron moving on. Tex called from behind him. Heading to the pub, Jack turned, smiled faintly. In a minute, he looked up. The clouds broke, revealing a stretch of perfect blue fading into night. For the first time, it felt peaceful. The sky no longer belonged to war, but to the men who had fought to make it free. Jack whispered to the wind, "The iron sky has turned to silver.